My name is Savannah, and I am 32 years old. Family holidays were always sacred to me, especially Thanksgiving. Growing up, my mom and I created beautiful memories around the dinner table, just the two of us against the world. Then my stepfather Brian entered our lives 5 years ago, bringing his judgmental parents along. Yesterday, I received a call that shattered my heart. My mom told me I was no longer welcome at Thanksgiving because my stepdad's parents, who have always hated me, would be there. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt unwelcome in your own family. I was raised by my mom Janet, who became a single parent when my father walked out on us when I was 8 years old. His departure left emotional scars, but it also forged an unbreakable bond between my mother and me. We faced significant financial struggles, often barely making rent in our small two-bedroom apartment. But Janet worked multiple jobs to keep us afloat. Despite the hardships, she never missed my school events or forgot to celebrate even the smallest victories. Those early years shaped me into a determined, hardworking person. I started working part-time jobs at 16 to help with household expenses while maintaining honor roll grades. When college acceptance letters arrived, I was thrilled, but also anxious about the cost. Through a combination of scholarships, student loans, and continuing to work throughout my studies, I managed to graduate with a degree in marketing. My relationship with my mother remained strong during those years. We spoke daily, and Sunday dinners at her place became our sacred ritual. I had built a decent career at a digital marketing agency by 27 and had finally reached a point where I could help my mom financially instead of the other way around. I felt proud of what we had accomplished together. That same year, Janet met Brian at a community fundraiser. He was charming, financially stable, and seemed genuinely interested in making her happy. When she first introduced us, I was cautiously optimistic. Brian owned a successful insurance agency, was well-spoken, and treated my mother with respect. He made efforts to include me in conversations and asked thoughtful questions about my work and interests. I began to hope that my mother had finally found someone worthy of her. 3 months into their relationship, Janet excitedly informed me that Brian wanted us to meet his parents, Walter and Frances Miller. I still remember her exact words. "They are very important to Brian, and this means he is serious about us." The dinner was scheduled at an upscale restaurant I could barely afford, which should have been my first warning sign. The Millers arrived in their luxury sedan, dressed impeccably. Walter had the firm handshake of a businessman used to asserting dominance, while Frances offered a smile that never quite reached her eyes. From the beginning, their questions felt like an interrogation rather than genuine interest. "So, Savannah, you work in marketing, interesting choice. Not very stable these days with all these tech layoffs, is it?" Walter commented while studying the wine list. "Actually, our agency has been growing steadily. We just landed 2 major clients last quarter," I responded politely. Frances tilted her head slightly. "And where did you attend college, dear? Brian went to Dartmouth, you know." When I named my state university, Frances exchanged a quick glance with Walter. "How nice that those schools provide opportunities for everyone," she said with a thin smile. Throughout the evening, they made several comments about my background, suggesting that growing up without a father must have been challenging, and repeatedly mentioning how fortunate my mother was to have met their son. They spoke of their family traditions and vacations in ways that highlighted the difference between their privileged lifestyle and my more humble upbringing. Janet seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of judgment, or perhaps she was choosing to ignore it. Either way, she laughed too loudly at their jokes and repeatedly mentioned her volunteer work as if trying to prove her worthiness to them. By the time Brian and my mother announced their engagement 6 months later, the pattern was established. The wedding planning became a battleground, with the Millers insisting on an elaborate ceremony that reflected their social standing rather than my mother's simpler tastes. When I suggested incorporating some meaningful traditions from our past family celebrations, Frances dismissed them as quaint, but not quite right for this occasion. The wedding itself was beautiful but felt alien. Janet looked stunning but somehow different, wearing a designer dress chosen by Frances and sporting a new hairstyle that the older woman had suggested. I stood beside her as maid of honor, feeling increasingly like an outsider in her new life. After the honeymoon, subtle changes in my mother became more apparent. She began using phrases that sounded like Frances, proper ladies always, and people of our standing. She became more critical of my apartment, my clothes, even the men I dated. Where once she had celebrated my independence, she now questioned why I wasn't prioritizing finding a husband. During a family dinner 6 months after the wedding, Walter made a comment about career women who sacrifice family for ambition. Instead of defending me as she once would have, Janet nodded along. Later, when Frances criticized the dessert I had brought, store-bought, I assume, my mother quickly offered to share her mother-in-law's recipe with me. So next time will be better, honey. I drove home that night with an unfamiliar heaviness in my chest. The mother who had taught me to stand tall and speak my truth was disappearing before my eyes, replaced by someone eager to erase our past and embrace the Millers' vision of proper family life. As the months passed, I tried various approaches to maintain my relationship with my mother. I invited her for lunch dates at our favorite cafe, suggested shopping trips like we used to enjoy, and continued our tradition of sending each other funny greeting cards for minor holidays. Sometimes glimpses of my real mom would shine through, but those moments became increasingly rare when Brian or his parents were involved. The Millers seemed determined to establish their dominance in my mother's new life, and by extension, diminish my importance. Their methods were subtle but persistent. During a family dinner at their spacious home, Walter spent 10 minutes questioning my career choices. Marketing is so transient, don't you think nothing solid or substantial like insurance or finance? He remarked while carving the roast with precision. Brian has built something that will last generations. When I explained that digital marketing was actually a growing field with excellent prospects, Frances jumped in. Yes, but dear, at your age, shouldn't you be thinking about stability? Something that would allow you to be present when you have children, if you ever do, of course. The implication that my career choices would make me an inadequate mother stung, especially when Janet nodded along. Savannah has always been so focused on her independence, she said, as if this were a character flaw rather than the strength she had once encouraged. Another incident occurred during a family birthday celebration for Brian. His nieces were visiting, both married young to men from good families, as Frances repeatedly pointed out. Throughout the afternoon, Frances drew comparisons between them and me. Melissa was just promoted at her husband's family firm, but she still manages to volunteer at the children's hospital twice a week, she announced. The perfect balance of ambition and feminine nurturing, wouldn't you say, Janet? My mother agreed enthusiastically, then turned to me. Maybe Melissa could talk to you about opportunities at their company. Savannah might be more prestigious than what you're doing now. The third and perhaps most painful incident happened during a holiday gathering when Frances orchestrated a family photo. She arranged everyone carefully, then looked at me with practiced surprise. "Oh, Savannah, would you mind taking the picture? We want to get all the Millers together." I stood there holding the camera, watching my mother position herself between Brian and Frances, without a word of protest about my exclusion. Later, when I mentioned it privately, Janet sighed with exasperation. "It's not everything is about you, Savannah. It was their family photo. Why make a big deal about it? Mom, you're my family. How do you think it felt to be the only one left out?" She shook her head. "You're being too sensitive. Frances was trying to document her family. It's important to her." "And what about what's important to me, to us?" I asked. "We need to adapt, Savannah. Brian and his family have welcomed me into their world, and I'm grateful. You should be too." Her tone held a finality that silenced further discussion. My boyfriend Jackson witnessed many of these interactions and provided much-needed support. After particularly difficult encounters with the Millers, he would listen as I processed my hurt and confusion. "They're intimidated by you," he suggested once. "You represent a part of your mom's life they can't control." That insight was helpful, but it didn't diminish the pain of watching my mother gradually transform into someone who prioritized the Millers' approval over our relationship. During this period, I reached out to my Aunt Linda, my mother's younger sister, who had noticed the changes in Janet as well. "She's always been a people pleaser," Linda told me over coffee. "After your dad left, she became even more determined to create perfect appearances. Brian and his parents represent the stability and social standing she's craved. But she raised me to be strong and independent, I protested. Yes, because that's what she wanted for you. But maybe not what she knew how to be herself, Linda replied thoughtfully. I'm not excusing her behavior, Savannah. I'm just trying to understand it too. What seemed like a minor incident at a summer barbecue revealed the deepening divide. I had brought a homemade potato salad using my grandmother's recipe, a dish my mother and I had prepared together countless times. When I set it on the table, Frances immediately commented that store-bought sides would have been fine, clearly assuming I hadn't made it myself. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. Oh, I should have mentioned we're trying to be more health-conscious these days. Frances has been teaching me some wonderful low-carb recipes. She whisked my potato salad away to the kitchen and returned with a kale salad that Frances had brought. The dismissal of our shared family tradition hurt more than any direct criticism could have. Later, I found my untouched potato salad hidden behind other dishes in the refrigerator. That night, Jackson held me as I cried. I feel like I'm losing her, I admitted. And the worst part is, she doesn't even seem to notice I'm gone. October brought cooler weather and the annual discussion of holiday plans. Janet called me one evening sounding more like her old self than she had in months. Savannah, Brian, and I are hosting Thanksgiving this year, she announced excitedly. I want you and Jackson to come. I'll make my famous apple pie and we can use the good china grandmother left me. Her enthusiasm was infectious, reminding me of the holidays we used to share. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about our relationship. That sounds wonderful, Mom. What can I bring? Just yourselves, she replied warmly. Though maybe your cranberry sauce? You know I've never been able to get it quite right. This small acknowledgement of our shared history meant everything to me. I immediately requested Thursday and Friday off work, started planning my outfit, and bought ingredients for the cranberry sauce. Jackson and I discussed which wine to bring that would impress Brian while still being thoughtful. I even scheduled a hair appointment, wanting to look my best for what felt like an important opportunity to reconnect with my mother. 1 week before Thanksgiving, my phone rang while I was reviewing a client presentation. Seeing my mother's name, I answered with a smile, expecting last-minute coordination about the holiday meal. Hi, Mom. I was just thinking about you. I found that cranberry recipe we talked about. There was a pause, then Janet's voice came through noticeably less enthusiastic than during our previous conversation. Savannah, that's actually why I'm calling. There's been a slight change of plans for Thanksgiving. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. What kind of change? Well, Walter and Frances decided they'd like to join us this year instead of going to Brian's sister's place. She hesitated. And you know how they can be. Okay, I said slowly, not yet understanding where this was heading. The thing is, Savannah, you and the Millers have always had a bit of tension. And this is Brian's first time hosting his parents for Thanksgiving in our new home. We really want everything to go smoothly. The implication hung in the air for a moment before she continued. So Brian and I think it might be best if you and Jackson made other plans this year. The Millers find you difficult, and I just can't deal with the stress of managing everyone's feelings during the holiday. The words hit me like a physical blow. Are you uninviting me from Thanksgiving? Your own daughter. Don't be so dramatic, Savannah. I'm just trying to avoid an uncomfortable situation. You know the Millers are important to Brian and they're not comfortable around you. And I'm not important to you. My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay composed. Of course you are, honey. That's not fair. This is just one holiday. Her tone shifted to one I recognized, her placating voice. How about this, you and Jackson can come by for dessert after the Millers leave around 7 or 8. That way you still get to be part of the day. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You want me to sit at home while you have Thanksgiving with your new family and then show up for leftovers after they're gone, like I'm some obligation you're fitting in? Now you're just trying to make me feel guilty, Janet said, her voice hardening. I'm trying to find a compromise here. A compromise would involve everyone giving something up, Mom. The only person being excluded is me. Savannah, please try to understand. Brian's relationship with his parents is important. They're elderly and traditional. They've always been there for him. And I haven't always been there for you. I asked quietly. That's different. You're young, you have your own life, and frankly, you've never made much effort with the Millers. That accusation stung because of how patently false it was. I've been nothing but polite to them despite their constant judgment and backhanded comments. Comments you never defend me from anymore. If you'd just try harder to fit in with them. Fit in, Mom. They've made it clear they don't think I'm good enough from day one. And now you're choosing them over me. If you really loved me, you'd understand and want what's best for my marriage, she replied, pulling out the ultimate guilt card. If you really loved me, you wouldn't ask me to accept being treated this way, I countered. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Janet becoming increasingly defensive and me growing more hurt and angry. It ended with her saying, "This is exactly why the Millers find you difficult. You always have to make everything about yourself. Just once, can't you think about what I need?" After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. My own mother had uninvited me from Thanksgiving to appease people who had consistently undermined and disrespected me. Worse, she had framed it as my failure, my inability to fit in or make an effort. When Jackson came home that evening, I broke down telling him what happened. His initial disbelief quickly turned to outrage. "She can't be serious," he said, pacing our living room. "To choose her in-laws over her own daughter? That's beyond messed up, Savannah." That night, I barely slept, replaying years of incidents in my mind. The pattern was clear now: my mother's gradual surrender to the Millers' influence, her increasing willingness to sacrifice our relationship to gain their approval. Each memory brought fresh pain, from Frances's dismissive comments about my career to my mother's silence when I needed her support. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Aunt Linda, her voice tight with anger. "Janet just told me what she did. I'm absolutely appalled, Savannah. I told her exactly what I thought about it, too." Her validation helped but couldn't heal the fundamental wound. My mother had made her choice, and it wasn't me. The week that followed my mother's phone call was one of the most emotionally turbulent periods of my life. The initial shock gave way to waves of different emotions, sometimes hitting all at once, sometimes cycling through in a relentless pattern. There was anger so intense it occasionally took my breath away. How dare she discard me for people who had never shown me genuine kindness? How could she not see what she was doing? The anger would sometimes manifest physically. I found myself slamming kitchen cabinets, aggressively scrubbing surfaces that were already clean, or going for runs that left my muscles screaming. Beneath the anger lay a deeper, more painful emotion: betrayal. This wasn't a stranger or casual acquaintance who had hurt me. This was the woman who had bandaged my skinned knees, who had celebrated every small victory with me, who had promised we would always be each other's rock. The betrayal felt like a physical ache in my chest, making it difficult to eat or sleep. Jackson was my steadfast support through it all, alternating between providing a sympathetic ear and offering righteous indignation on my behalf. "Your mother is making a terrible mistake," he assured me. "One day she'll realize what she's thrown away." While his support was invaluable, I knew I needed additional help processing the situation. I contacted my therapist, Dr. Marshall, and explained the situation, asking for an emergency session. She fit me in the next day. "What you're experiencing is a form of parental rejection," she explained during our session. "It's particularly painful because it triggers fears of abandonment that may connect back to your father's departure, even though these are very different circumstances." "But shouldn't I be able to handle this better?" I asked through tears. "I'm a grown woman, not a child." "The parent-child relationship doesn't stop mattering when we reach adulthood, Savannah. In fact, these hurts can be more complex because we have the cognitive awareness to understand them fully while still experiencing the emotional impact." My close friends rallied around me as well. My college roommate Jenna insisted on meeting for coffee, where she expressed outrage on my behalf. "Your mother is being manipulated by these people, but that doesn't excuse her behavior," she said firmly. "You deserve better." My coworker Alyssa took a different approach. "Families are complicated," she said. "Maybe give your mom some space, then try talking to her again when emotions aren't so high." The conflicting advice reflected my own internal debate. Part of me wanted to cut ties completely to protect myself from further hurt. Another part desperately wanted to repair the relationship with the only parent who had been consistently present in my life. The darkest moment came 3 days before Thanksgiving. I had returned to the empty apartment after Jackson left for a work commitment. Surrounded by silence, I found myself opening a box of childhood mementos. Among them was a Thanksgiving art project from 3rd grade, a paper turkey where I'd written, "I'm thankful for my mom," on each colorful feather. The memory of how proudly Janet had displayed it on our refrigerator for years broke something inside me. I sobbed uncontrollably, curled up on the couch, clutching that faded paper turkey. Through my tears, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, pictures of my mother and me at my college graduation on weekend hikes baking Christmas cookies together. In each one, her pride and love for me were unmistakable. Where had that mother gone? The physical toll of this emotional turmoil manifested in various ways. I developed insomnia, lying awake, replaying conversations, or imagining what the Thanksgiving dinner at my mother's would be like without me. My appetite disappeared, food tasting like cardboard when I forced myself to eat. Even my skin broke out from stress, something that hadn't happened since my college finals. Some well-meaning friends suggested forgiveness as the path forward. "She's still your mom," my friend Teresa said. "Family is too important to throw away." Others encouraged a clean break. "She's showing you who she is now," argued my cousin Michael. "Believe her and protect yourself." I filled several pages of my journal trying to sort through these perspectives and my own conflicted feelings. One entry read, "I keep trying to understand her side. Is it possible to love someone and still throw them away when they become inconvenient? Is that even love at all?" 5 days after uninviting me, my mother sent a text that showed how disconnected she was from the gravity of what she'd done. "Don't forget we're having dessert around 7:30 on Thursday. Let me know what time you and Jackson will arrive. Love you." No acknowledgement of the hurt she'd caused. No recognition that she had fundamentally altered our relationship. Just an expectation that I would accept the crumbs of her attention after being excluded from the main event. That text message brought clarity. I couldn't change my mother or her choices, but I could decide how I responded to them. I could choose whether to accept being treated as an afterthought by the person who should value me most. In that moment, looking at her casual text, I realized I needed to take action for my own well-being. After several days of emotional turmoil, I finally reached a decision: I would not accept the dessert-only invitation. The choice wasn't made lightly, nor was it motivated purely by anger or spite. It came after deep reflection about self-respect and what it means to allow others to determine your worth. I sat with Jackson in our living room, a half-empty cup of tea growing cold in my hands, as I explained my thinking. If I show up for dessert after being explicitly uninvited from the main celebration, I'm telling my mother and the Millers that it's acceptable to treat me as an afterthought. Jackson nodded, his face showing both support and concern. "I completely agree. What are you thinking for Thursday instead?" "That's the thing," I said, feeling a weight lift slightly as I spoke the words. "Maybe this is an opportunity to create a new tradition, something that reflects who we are and the values we actually believe in." His face brightened. "Like what? What if we hosted our own Thanksgiving? Not a pity party, but a genuine celebration with people who actually want to be around us." The idea gained momentum as we discussed it. While part of me still ached at the thought of not seeing my mother on the holiday, another part felt a stirring of excitement about creating something meaningful from this painful situation. My first call was to Aunt Linda, who had been my staunch supporter throughout this ordeal. I barely finished explaining my decision before she responded. "I was hoping you'd say that. In fact, I was about to call and invite you and Jackson to my place. I told your mother I'm not attending her dinner either. I refuse to participate in something so hurtful to my niece." Her unwavering loyalty brought tears to my eyes. "Are you sure I know how much you've always enjoyed spending holidays with Mom?" "The Janet hosting that dinner isn't the sister I want to celebrate with," Linda said firmly. "The invitation stands, but no pressure. If you two want to do your own thing, I completely understand." Jackson's parents, who lived in Colorado, also called to extend their long-distance support. "We wish we could be there with you," his mother said warmly. "But please know you're in our hearts. You're family to us, Savannah." Their kindness was a balm to my wounded spirit, a reminder that family could be found in many forms. The plan evolved further when I mentioned our situation to my coworker Alyssa, who admitted she had been dreading spending Thanksgiving alone after her recent breakup. "What if we did a Friendsgiving at our place?" I suggested. "Nothing fancy, just good food and good company." "You'd want to do that instead of family Thanksgiving?" she asked, seeming surprised. "Trust me, family isn't always what it's cracked up to be," I replied with a sad smile. "Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the one we're born into." By Tuesday evening, our guest list had grown to include Alyssa, my friend Jenna, and her husband, and two other colleagues who didn't have local family. We created a shared document for the menu, with everyone signing up to bring different dishes. I volunteered to handle the turkey, determined to master the recipe my mother had always prepared. The next day, I threw myself into preparations with perhaps too much intensity: grocery shopping, cleaning the apartment, borrowing extra chairs from neighbors. Jackson gently suggested that some of my frenetic energy might be an attempt to avoid my feelings, but also supported my need to focus on something productive. That evening, my mother sent another text. "Just checking if you and Jackson are still coming for dessert tomorrow. Frances is bringing her famous pumpkin pie." After an hour of drafting and deleting responses, I finally sent, "Mom, I've made other plans for Thanksgiving. I can't pretend it doesn't hurt that you've excluded me from the family dinner to accommodate people who have never accepted me. I hope you have a nice holiday." Her response came quickly. "I'm trying my best to balance everyone's needs here, Savannah. I don't know why you always have to make things so difficult. This attitude is exactly why the Millers find you challenging." The familiar pattern of blame shifting made my resolve stronger. When she called a few minutes later, I answered calmly. "You're really not coming at all now?" she demanded, her voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "After I arranged for you to still be part of the day. Being invited for leftovers after your real guests leave isn't being part of the day, Mom. It's being treated as an obligation." "You're being incredibly selfish," she said sharply. "This is important to Brian. And I'm not important to you, I'm your daughter." "Of course you are, but you're an adult with your own life. The Millers are elderly. They won't be around forever." "Neither will I, Mom. Neither will our relationship if this is how you choose to treat me." The call ended with her accusing me of emotional manipulation and me feeling simultaneously drained and strengthened in my resolve. Despite the lingering sadness, I knew I was making the right choice for my self-respect and emotional health. Wednesday was spent preparing for our Friendsgiving. I researched turkey recipes, made cranberry sauce from scratch, and prepared pie crusts that would be filled the next morning. Each task was both a distraction from my hurt and an affirmation of my decision to create something positive from the situation. That night, Jackson and I transformed our modest apartment into a warm, welcoming space for our guests. We arranged autumn-colored candles on the dining table, created a hand-lettered "Grateful For" board where guests could pin notes, and set up a comfortable seating area for post-dinner conversations. As we surveyed our work, Jackson wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You know what, I think this might end up being the best Thanksgiving we've ever had." I leaned back against him, allowing myself to hope that he might be right. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a crisp brightness that matched my determined mood. I woke early, momentarily disoriented by the absence of the traditional holiday anxiety I usually felt before family gatherings. There was still nervousness, but it was different, the excitement of creating something new, rather than the dread of enduring familiar tensions. I slipped out of bed, leaving Jackson sleeping, and padded to the kitchen to begin preparing the turkey. As I worked, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "The table is set. Still hoping you'll reconsider and join us for dessert." For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should just accept the partial invitation to keep peace. I stared at the message, feeling the pull of old patterns and a lifetime of trying to maintain my relationship with my only consistent parent. As if sensing my wavering resolve, Jackson appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled from sleep. "Everything okay?" I showed him the text. "Part of me still wants to go," I admitted, Is that crazy after everything? Not crazy, he said gently. She's your mom. But remember why we decided to do our own celebration. This isn't about punishing her, it's about respecting yourself. His reminder strengthened my resolve. I put the phone away without responding and returned to preparing our meal. By mid-morning, delicious aromas filled our apartment. The turkey was roasting perfectly, and the pies, apple and pumpkin, were cooling on racks. I had just finished setting the table when Jackson called me to the living room to see his handiwork. He had created a photo display on our main wall, carefully selected pictures of friends and supportive family members throughout the years. In the center was a beautiful, candid shot of me laughing with Aunt Linda from last Christmas. I thought we could celebrate the people who show up for us, he explained, a visual reminder of our chosen family. The gesture brought tears to my eyes. It's perfect, I whispered, hugging him tightly. Our first guest arrived at 2, Alyssa bearing a gorgeous green bean casserole and a bottle of wine. I can't remember the last time I was actually excited for Thanksgiving, she confessed as she helped arrange her dish on our buffet table. One by one, the others arrived, each bringing not just food, but warmth and genuine happiness to be included. Jenna and her husband David brought homemade rolls and sweet potato casserole. My colleagues Marcus and Taylor arrived with a spectacular charcuterie board and multiple side dishes. The apartment filled with conversation and laughter as everyone pitched in to put final touches on the meal. At 4:30, just as we were about to sit down to eat, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Aunt Linda standing there, her eyes bright with unshed tears and a dish in her hands. I hope there's room for one more, she said. I couldn't stay at Janet's any longer. I pulled her into a tight hug. There's always room for you. As we settled around the table, I felt a surge of gratitude so intense it momentarily overwhelmed me. Looking at these faces, friends and family who had chosen to spend their holiday with us, I realized we had created something beautiful out of rejection. Jackson raised his glass. I'd like to propose a toast. To found family, the people who show us that love isn't about obligation but choice. To found family. Everyone echoed, glasses clinking. As we began passing dishes, Aunt Linda leaned over. You should know what happened at your mother's, she said quietly. I was there for about an hour before I couldn't take it anymore. She described how Janet had seemed distracted and tense throughout the early part of the gathering. The Millers dominated the conversation, with Walter criticizing everything from the turkey's doneness to the setting of the table. Frances repeatedly mentioned how her daughter-in-law Elizabeth always prepared certain dishes properly, while Brian attempted to smooth over the tensions with forced joviality. Janet kept checking her phone, Linda told me. When Frances asked who she was expecting to hear from, your mother just said no one and put it away, but I could tell she was thinking about you. That knowledge brought a complicated mix of satisfaction and sadness. I didn't want my mother to be unhappy, but perhaps it was necessary for her to experience the consequences of her choice. Throughout our meal, my phone buzzed several times with texts from Janet. The first was terse. Hope you're enjoying your alternative plans. The second, sent an hour later, carried a different tone. The turkey didn't turn out as well as when you helped me with it. By late afternoon, she had shifted to guilt. I can't believe you're putting me in this position today of all days. I chose not to respond to any of them, instead focusing on the genuine connections happening around me. We shared stories, played impromptu games, and took dozens of photos to commemorate our first Friendsgiving. When we gathered around the Grateful For board to share what we'd written, I was moved by how many notes mentioned our gathering specifically. I'm grateful for friends who become family, Alyssa had written. Thankful for new traditions and authentic connections, was Marcus's contribution. Grateful for the reminder that we choose how we want to be treated. Read Jackson's note. As the evening progressed, we moved to the living room with dessert plates and coffee. Linda shared funny stories from my childhood that had everyone laughing, while Jackson's parents joined briefly via video call to raise a long-distance toast. By 9 o'clock, I felt a contentment I hadn't expected to experience on this day. The gathering had transformed what could have been a day of isolation and hurt into one of genuine connection. As our friends began to depart, each leaving with leftovers, packages, and warm hugs, my phone lit up with a final text from my mother. "The Millers just left. Please come over now. We need to talk." I showed the message to Jackson, who raised his eyebrows. "What do you want to do?" I considered for a moment. "Nothing tonight," I decided. Today was for creating something new, not revisiting old pain. As I closed the door behind our last guest, I realized that while the hurt of my mother's rejection hadn't disappeared, it no longer defined the day. We had reclaimed Thanksgiving and created memories I would cherish, rather than ones I would need to recover from. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke with a strange mixture of peace and apprehension. Our Friendsgiving had been a genuine success, a warm gathering that reinforced the value of chosen family. Yet my mother's final text from the night before, "The Millers just left. Please come over now. We need to talk," still weighed on me. After making coffee and settling on the couch with Jackson, I finally composed my response. "I'm not ready to come over. I need some time. If you want to talk, we can meet at Riverside Cafe on Saturday at 11. Suggesting a neutral location was deliberate. I needed this conversation to happen on equal terms, not in her space where the Millers' influence lingered in every carefully selected decor item. Her reply came quickly. "Fine, but I don't understand why you're making such a production out of this." Even in that brief text, I could sense her failure to grasp the gravity of what had happened between us. Still, I was committed to having the conversation, however difficult it might be. Saturday morning arrived with a light drizzle that matched my subdued mood. I dressed carefully, wanting to project confidence and composure. Jackson offered to drive me to the cafe and wait nearby, but I declined. "This is something I need to handle myself," I told him, though his support meant everything. I arrived early and selected a corner table, positioning myself so I could see the door. At precisely 11, my mother walked in, her expression a careful neutral. She had clearly taken pains with her appearance, her hair freshly styled, wearing a cashmere sweater I recognized as a gift from Francis. The first moments were tense and awkward. She sat down across from me with a tight smile, ordering a non-fat latte from the server before turning her attention to me. "You look tired," she said, her tone making it unclear whether this was concern or criticism. "It's been a difficult week," I replied simply. After our drinks arrived, the real conversation began. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, determined to remain calm while being absolutely honest about how her actions had affected me. "Mom, I need you to understand what happened when you uninvited me from Thanksgiving. You chose to exclude your only daughter to please people who have consistently made me feel unwelcome and judged." "That's not fair, Savannah," she immediately countered. "I was trying to manage a complicated situation. The Millers are Brian's parents. They're important to him. And I'm your daughter. Am I not important to you?" "Of course you are," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "But you're an adult. You should be able to understand that sometimes we need to make accommodations for family harmony." "By family, you mean the Millers, not me." I kept my voice steady. "That's the message you sent loud and clear." "You're being melodramatic. It was one holiday." "It's not about one holiday, Mom. It's about a pattern that's been developing since you married Brian. You consistently choose the Millers' comfort over our relationship. You no longer stand up for me when they make judgmental comments. You've changed who you are to fit their mold." Her defenses rose visibly. "I haven't changed. I've grown. I've adapted to a new chapter in my life. Why can't you be happy for me?" "I was happy for you when you found someone who treats you well. What I can't be happy about is watching you erase our history and values to become someone the Millers approve of." The conversation continued in this vein, with my mother defending her choices and minimizing my hurt. I maintained my composure even as frustration mounted. It seemed we were speaking different languages, unable to truly hear each other. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my childhood journal. "I want to show you something." I opened to a page I had marked dated from when I was 12 years old. "Dear Diary." I read aloud, "Mom stood up for me again today when Mrs. Peterson said I was too opinionated in class. Mom told her that having a voice is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. I want to be just like her when I grow up, so strong and brave. My mother's expression softened slightly as I continued reading entries that chronicled her courage, her principles, her fierce protection of me throughout my childhood. When I finished, I looked up to see tears in her eyes. "That's who you were," I said quietly. "The woman who taught me to stand tall, to speak my truth, to never let anyone make me feel small." What would that version of you think about uninviting your daughter from Thanksgiving to appease people who judge her? Something shifted in her face, a flash of recognition, perhaps even shame. She was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "I didn't realize. I didn't see it that way." "How did you see it, Mom?" "I thought I was being practical, making the best of a difficult situation." She twisted her napkin in her hands. "The Millers have such strong opinions about everything. It's exhausting sometimes trying to meet their standards." "Then why try?" I asked gently. The mom I knew didn't change herself to please others. She dabbed at her eyes. "It's complicated, Savannah. When you're alone for so long, then finally find someone. Sometimes you'll do things you never thought you would to keep that security." While I could understand her fear of being alone again, it didn't excuse her actions. "I need you to know that I can't continue in a relationship where I'm treated as optional or where I have to accept being judged and diminished." "What are you saying?" Alarm crept into her voice. "I'm saying I need boundaries. I won't attend events where the Miller's comfort is prioritized over treating me with basic respect. I won't pretend it's okay when you stay silent while they criticize me. And I need you to acknowledge how much your actions hurt me, not just dismiss my feelings as being dramatic or difficult." She was quiet again longer this time. "I don't want to lose you," she finally said, her voice small. "I don't want that either. But rebuilding our relationship has to start with honesty about where we are now." We talked for nearly 2 hours, moving through difficult emotions, occasional defensive moments, and gradually toward a tentative understanding. Her apology wasn't perfect. "I'm sorry you felt hurt by what happened," still placed the issue in my perception rather than her actions. But it was a start. I didn't offer instant forgiveness. Trust once broken couldn't be repaired in a single conversation. Instead, I suggested small steps forward: mother-daughter lunches without Brian or the Millers, a commitment to honest communication, and her agreement to reflect on how she had changed since her marriage. 1 month later, we met for coffee again, just the two of us. The conversation was easier, touching on neutral topics like work and friends. There were moments when glimpses of my old mother shone through her laugh, her insightful questions, her genuine interest in my life. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. 3 months after Thanksgiving, we had dinner at a restaurant we both loved. During our meal, she mentioned that she had started seeing her own therapist. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about changing myself for the Millers," she admitted. "It wasn't just you who noticed. Linda said the same thing." That vulnerability represented a significant step in our healing process. By Easter, we had established a new pattern of interaction. When she invited me to an Easter brunch that would include Brian and his parents, I accepted with clear boundaries. "I'll come, but if the Millers make dismissive comments, I expect you to acknowledge it, not ignore it." To my surprise, she kept her word. When Frances made a pointed remark about my creative Easter outfit, my mother calmly replied, "I think Savannah looks beautiful. She's always had a wonderful sense of style." Frances looked startled while I felt a surge of cautious hope. It was a small moment but significant, a sign that my mother was finding her voice again. The true test came as the next Thanksgiving approached. Instead of the tension and hurt of the previous year, we found a compromise that respected everyone's needs. My mother and Brian would have lunch with the Millers, while I would host a Friendsgiving similar to the one that had been so meaningful the year before. In the evening, my mother would come to my place for dessert, her visiting me rather than me being an afterthought at her gathering. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it represented growth and mutual respect. When my mother arrived at my apartment that Thanksgiving evening, she brought not only her famous apple pie, but also a card that read, "Thankful for second chances, and a daughter who taught me what true strength looks like." As I reflect on the journey of the past year, I realize how much I've learned about family boundaries and self-worth. The pain of that initial rejection led to a deeper understanding of what I need and deserve in relationships. It forced both my mother and me to examine patterns we might otherwise have continued indefinitely. I've learned that self-worth isn't determined by others' approval, that standing firm in your value is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for those who have forgotten how to value you properly. I've discovered that true family, whether biological or chosen, supports unconditionally, respects boundaries, and makes space for authenticity. Perhaps most importantly, I've come to understand that setting boundaries isn't selfish or unkind. It's an act of self-love that ultimately benefits all relationships in your life. It creates the possibility for connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. My relationship with my mother continues to evolve. There are still difficult moments and old patterns that sometimes resurface, but there is also new growth, greater honesty, and a hard-won appreciation for the fragility and resilience of family bonds. I keep the door open for healing with my biological family while cherishing the chosen family that supported me through one of my life's most painful chapters. Both have their place in my heart, and both have taught me invaluable lessons about love, forgiveness, and the courage to require better from those who claim to love you. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you navigate that challenging terrain? Share your experience in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to stand firm in your worth, even when it hurts. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are worthy of relationships that honor your whole self, not just the parts others find convenient.